This is really a common misconception, especially when it comes to trafficking for purposes of sexual exploitation. There is a prevailing belief that people who are prostituted are doing it of their own free will. And while the choice of activity may have been understood well in advance, it's very often the case that the conditions of that activity are not well understood. And that is often where the exploitation then takes place.
While it's possible to force someone physically, by physically forcing them to do something that they don't want to do, generally that's not how it happens. We like to call it structural exploitation. People who find themselves in particularly vulnerable situations, perhaps they've lost their house and they've needed to migrate and they're looking for work. Perhaps they're coming from situations of extreme poverty. They don't have the economic means to feed children or to feed themselves.
There is also the idea of being threatened, not just yourself but your family as well. So you may look as though you're there under your free will because you're not manacled, but the psychological fear and the physical abuse that you may be suffering may be more hidden, but that doesn't mean that you are there under your own free will.
People coming from vulnerable situations are often offered jobs and opportunities that may on the surface look legit, and they often will willingly accept these jobs, and they will go there expecting to be a waiter or a waitress. They'll go somewhere expecting to work on a construction site or to work on a fishing vessel, and find out that, that their passports are held, to find out that they're not paid properly, to find out that they have to pay certain fees to cover the cost of their transit to the place that they'll be working. And then little bits of that cost are taken out of their salary, and they're never able to earn enough to pay their way out.
นั้นตรงนี้เนี่ยคนที่ดูเหมือนว่าจะทำงานโดยอิสระไม่ได้ถูกบังคับควบคุมเนี่ยแต่จริงๆแล้วเนี่ยเขาก็โดยปริยายก็ไม่สามารถที่จะหลบหนีไปได้เนื่องจากว่าถูกยึดพาสปอร์ตแล้วก็อีกรูปแบบหนึ่งก็คือในเรื่องของการที่เขาไม่สามารถที่จะสื่อสารขอความช่วยเหลือได้แล้วก็มีการข่มขู่ว่าจะเป็นการทำร้ายครอบครัวในภูมิลำเนานะคะหรือว่าครอบครัวของตนเองอยู่ในประเทศต้นทางเพราะฉะนั้นตรงนี้เนี่ยก็จะทำให้เขาต้องอดทนทำงานแล้วก็มีความเชื่อว่าจะสามารถทำงานใช้หนี้นะคะแล้วก็วันหนึ่งก็สามารถที่จะเก็บเงินแล้วก็กลับบ้านมีเงินไปให้กับครอบครัวได้นะคะเพราะฉะนั้นตรงนี้เองเนี่ยก็เป็นสถานการณ์ที่ผู้ที่ตกเป็นผู้เสียหายจากการค้ามนุษย์เนี่ยต้องเผชิญอยู่
People who prostitute themselves or work in the sex sector themselves, they're often people who expect to be able to control their working hours, to be able to accept or reject particular clients or sexual practices, to accept or reject whether somebody uses a condom, to have that level of control over the interaction with the client.
There are three forms of consent. There is informed consent, there is coerced consent, and there's forced consent on this spectrum. Okay, so let's start with informed consent. Informed consent is where you have the mental and legal capacity to consent to something. The legal capacity is in relation to your age. Now that can change from country to country, but usually it's around either 16 or 18, something like that. There must be full disclosure of all the factors involved. Full disclosure. And it must be honest. You must then understand all of those factors that are involved. Ask questions, they must be answered truthfully. And fourthly, you agree to them. You voluntarily agree to them. That's informed consent. Let's then change to forced consent. This is really quite straightforward because in law, if there is any physical or sexual abuse, if any misrepresentation as to the facts, any fraud, legally, if you consent, it is not regarded as a legal consent, so it's vitiated automatically. So you cannot consent to those situations. The grey area, of course, comes in the middle in between, and that's coerced.
คุมแล้วก็ติดตามโดยห่างๆนะคะถึงแม้ว่าจะไม่ได้เข้ามาล็อกตัวหรือว่าถูกกักขังอยู่ในห้องเท่านั้นนะคะนั้นอันนี้ก็เป็นประเด็นที่การที่จะเข้าถึงผู้ที่ประสบปัญหาจากการค้ามนุษย์เนี่ยนะคะอาจจะมองแค่ภายนอกไม่ได้ว่าเขาไม่ได้ถูกกักขังเพราะฉะนั้นเขาก็ไม่ใช่คนที่ต้องการความช่วยเหลือนะคะ
There is a very gray line between what somebody is choosing to do and to what extent they are choosing to do it. People who have significant debt, for example, to pay off may not particularly want to be in that environment and may have very little control over the conditions of work, but they're earning a little bit of money, and that money is paying down a debt which they feel they need to repay, and if they do not pay that debt down, bad things will happen either to them or their extended family. So it's not an easy thing to discern. I won't say it's not worth a try.